Okay, so welcome to Defen episode number 50, and it is our third anniversary show. And it's fucking amazing. I mean, 3 years.
You're right on brand with the fucking amazing introduction, VJ. Yeah.
Exactly. I think we need to live up to our expectations, you know?
Yeah.
So, episode number 50. I don't know what to say, but I think we have one of our best friends and friend of the show, and also master tweeter, Mr. Michiel Borkent. We just did the calculation. We found out he's tweeting like 1 tweet per hour or something. Anyway, welcome to the show, Michiel.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Yeah. So, Ray, I think we need to do some introduction or something. It's episode number 50, so fuck it. I'm Vijay from Netherlands.
Yeah. I'm Ray from Belgium, really from the UK, but living in Belgium. So, sound UK-ish for a reason, but, living in the wet and weary Belgium at the moment. But, avoiding Brexit, thankfully, which is good.
We'll get there. I mean, this become purely political show these days, so fuck it, Oh, so Michiel,
anyway,
maybe a quick introduction.
Let's be nice to our guest as well,
Yes.
So, Michiel, you've paid to be on. What have you got to say for yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm the fanboy joining the band, right?
Yay!
Oh, it's so good to have you on the show, mate. It really is.
Yes. So you're in you just said that you're in the reduce all the distractions and don't do shitty stuff phase. So why are you on this show?
Yeah, well, this show sparks a lot of joy. So I removed all the podcasts that I found are getting in the way, but definitely stays in my list. So together with some other Clojure podcasts, but from Europe, the vegetarian Clojure podcasts are definitely number one. So
I think this is our. I think this is one of those times when all three of us are vegetarians, right?
I think so.
I think Michael is even a vegan. Michiel. Michiel. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah. Michiel.
Yeah, but we can focus on the things that are similar. So we're all vegetarian right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Fair enough.
Very inclusive. Yeah, we're all vegetarian. Yeah.
As long as you're not non-vegetarian, that's good.
Yeah.
So, Michiel,
please don't eat meat while you're listening to this episode. Is what we're trying to say. I mean, in the privacy of your own homes, you can do what you want.
I listened to an old show yesterday just to get into the vibe of this show, and it was actually the show with Alex Miller in 2016, just before the Euro closure.
Oh, right.
And you were also saying this to him, like, well, okay, it's okay that you're not a vegetarian, but please don't eat meat during the show. And he said, like,
we keep using the same jokes.
I
think that's what he's telling us.
Alex said, like, I actually have some beef jerky on my desk, but I won't touch it during the show.
So, Michiel, maybe because of course we know each other for a fairly good amount of time. Obviously, as
how do you know each other, Vijay? Let's give a little bit of background for the people out there.
I think it's better Michiel talks.
So how did I meet Vijay? The story.
Oh shit!
Oh my god! It's like the 50th show, and you get the big reveals now.
Now you know.
I think I saw Vijay for the first time at the Amsterdam Clojure meetup. I think. Yeah. Probably at Backbase company that hosted the meetup. Yeah. And I remember Vijay saying, well, I have to wait in Amsterdam for my Mac to be repaired. You were bringing your Mac to the Genius bar.
Yes.
And during that waiting, you went to the Clojure meetup. So I think I saw you there for the first time. And
did you just walk in off the street, Vijay? Is that the idea? Yeah,
that's the whole idea.
What's there's some room down the road here. They've got some bullshit going on. Oh, okay.
And
at least it's not like we met him.
The full the full time frame, but I also remember that VJ, he organized the Clojure meetup in Rotterdam.
Yeah.
So I went there also a few times, and but I also worked with VJ once.
Oh.
At a Clojure project in the commercial setting. That's probably 2013, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe 2011, 12-ish. Or maybe 13. I don't exactly remember. Yeah, sometime during that time.
Yeah, it was 2013 because that was the year I left my job as a lecturer. So
yeah, so you're coming from academia into commercial, quote unquote commercial thing.
Right.
That was a Datomic project, right? Datomic, Angular, and it was an interesting.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the first projects in the Netherlands, probably with Clojure shit.
Probably, yeah. It wasn't very nice.
Was Clojure shit was that the forerunner to Clojure Script? Clojure shit.
Yeah. That before Clojure Script was introduced, there used to be another language. We know from 2013, which is like I don't know, ages ago.
Yeah.
Pre-prototypes.
Like commercial Clojure projects.
Protocols.
Been there, done that. You know, in 2013 already.
Oh man, yeah, good times. I think it was the probably the initial version of Datomic, and also the Immutant was the web server because
on JBoss,
and then Angular was the front end for that one.
Yeah, I always try to avoid that part of the code base.
Yeah,
and I think I managed pretty well. So
yeah, so that's how we met.
Yeah, I kinda think.
And then later, I think we kept bumping into each other a lot into the Clojure stuff. Yeah. So enough about our stuff. So Michiel, I know that you were already teaching Clojure, or you actually wrote a book in Clojure before coming to that project, right?
That's true. Yeah. So I was a lecturer before that job. I started in 2010. And I did it for 3.5 years. And well, in the beginning, I focused on programming courses that were already there, like Java programming, C# programming, all kinds of Oracle stuff. And but I was already into Clojure back then. My Clojure interest began in like 2010. Almost around the same time I joined that University of Applied Science. And I never tried to force Clojure on students, but I couldn't help myself. So and
I'm not going to force you, but if you don't learn Clojure, you're not going to pass. That's it.
Yeah, well, it didn't exactly go like that, but yeah, I was teaching these object-oriented courses, but there was always this nagging feeling like this is actually not how it should be done, right?
I'm teaching these people Clojure. Evil shit.
yeah, but it's part of the program, so you have to. But actually, later on, there was some room in the curriculum, and my colleague lecturers, they knew that I was into functional programming and into Clojure, or at least other ways of programming, and they wanted to have a course on like. They called it advanced programming. So it was like a very general topic where I could fit in anything I wanted, basically. And that is where I wrote a Clojure course for. And that course was, I taught that course 2 years in a row, I think, 2011 and 2012. And it was taught to 2 classes simultaneously, 2 classes of 30 students, so 60 students a year basically. And so that was actually the first way how I made money with Clojure. not actually writing software, but teaching it.
Yeah. Did you
And
get
it was
ever
fun.
get any follow up from those students? Did
Yeah,
you ever keep in
actually.
touch with any of those guys or girls?
Actually, yes.
Ladies? Yeah.
So there was one student I regularly am in contact with still. So for him, Clojure was really eye-opening. Like, oh, can you also do software like this and less code, functional programming? Oh, well, it was really eye-opening to him. And then he decided after this bachelor program that I was teaching to continue to the University of Utrecht and do the computer science compiler program there as a master. And there he, I think, yeah, they are very keen on Haskell there on in that university. So that there he converted to Haskell basically, and so I kind of lost him from the Clojure community, but he's still very much into functional programming, and my course was the first, the first way of getting to know it for him. And another student I remember, I actually didn't know he liked Clojure because it wasn't very obvious during the course. But after the course, he went for an internship to Japan, and I didn't hear from him for a while. And then he went to Shanghai, and it turned out he was doing Clojure there, a Clojure job.
Right.
wow.
Okay.
And and later on, we had some chat, and he thanked me, like, thank you for introducing me to this stuff, and I'm still really into it. And oh, okay. So there are a few people that I think I influenced them, and it made an impact on the rest of their, or at least the beginning of their career. And but there were also a lot of students like, yeah, whatever.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. But a few of them really liked it, and well, I guess that's already worth it. So
yeah, totally. There's a few souls saved. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you sent Clojure to faraway lands. Go to east and spread the word.
Yes, exactly.
Like the disciples, like go.
Yeah, it's just evangelism. Like send the missionary to east.
Yeah, but now he's converting people to Haskell. But
but I remember when we were talking a couple of times, I think this topic has come up, like Clojure being the gateway drug to getting into Haskell, right? I mean, this is something that I've been trying multiple times as well. Do you think, because I see your tweets, and a couple of times I see that you're every week or so, every month, you try to do something with Haskell as well. So so do you still see that as the path, or?
No. Well, I personally get into Haskell like once a year. Like I have like once 1 month of really obsessive focus on something new, and once a year that's Haskell. So and then I get into it, and then I get tired of it, and then I get back to Clojure, and then I continue with my life. So that's basically usually how it goes.
It's a bit like that story where you have the people bringing the cows and the sheep and the goats into their house, and then when because they're complaining their house is too small, so they're bringing the sheep and the goat and the cows and the chickens, and then after a week or two, they let all the chickens and the sheep and the goat out, and then their house feels bigger all of a sudden,
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but I do think I worked through the book Haskell Programming from First Principles.
Yeah.
It's a relatively new Haskell book, and that's actually the first time that I made it from the beginning to the end and actually did a real project in Haskell. Because every year I tried Haskell again and for a few weeks, but I never got anything really serious done in it. But yeah, now I have the feeling that I finally can do something in it. But go figure how steep the learning curve is, because in Clojure it was like a matter of days that I made something productive, like a running app on the internet. And in Clojure in Haskell that took me years.
I think Haskell is a bit like the kind of the equivalent of Finnegan's Wake, you know?
What the hell is that?
Yeah,
I mean,
what
stop making 1800 references. We know you're old.
Yeah,
What
no.
the fuck?
Finnegan's Wake is like one of the well, it's a literary classic. I'm afraid to tell you, people. It's a book by.
You're like,
it's a
"Get
book
off
by-
my lawn."
Have you heard of this guy James Joyce? You know, he
No
wrote. He
idea.
wrote no, you never heard of James Joyce. Shut up. Come on, of course you've heard of
You're
him.
from UK.
He was Irish, actually.
We are not.
James Joyce
I can
was Irish.
pretend
sorry.
I heard of him. So let's pretend.
Well, James
and then-
Joyce.
Oh, yeah, right, James Joyce,
wrote
yeah,
this
yeah,
book
yeah.
called Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, and he also wrote this a very difficult book called Ulysses, and then that was like his last book, essentially, like kind of in semi-English. Ulysses was a stream of consciousness book. It was a very like avant-garde at the time. But after that, he wrote this book called Finnegan's Wake, which is in a kind of its own language. And it's a kind of, what should we say, it's a kind of like the holy grail for many literary students that, that they can go to Finnegan's Wake and read it and, sort of challenge themselves to understand what this literary genius meant by his masterwork. But very few people actually make it through the book. So
Okay, yeah.
So
that's a very long story.
So
for,
Haskell is one of
I thought
That's
you
kind
were
of
talking
like
about
the same with
Finnegan's
Haskell, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
But
You see where the
Michiel,
comparison comes from anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, of course.
So what if Haskell is this Finnegan's thing? What is
Finnegan's
Clojure?
Wake. Yeah? What is Clojure? Clojure's, I don't know, Jack and Jill, I guess. Yeah. Spot the dog,
That I know. Jack and Jill, I know. Classic. But Michiel, what is bringing you back to Clojure? Every time you go and taste some Haskell, and then you're like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go back." And
Well, it's not like fuck it, I'm leaving something and I'm going back to something. It's more like
It's a small love affair. A small.
yeah, it's like a small don't tell anyone kind of thing.
I've booked a hotel room.
Except that I tweet about it every hour, but
yes,
yeah. So Haskell is more like learning new things kind of thing, because Clojure, I'm doing it since, I don't know, I'm well, for my work at least 2013, and before that for as a hobby for a couple of years. So and Haskell really could teach me new thinking. Everyone was talking on Twitter about this typed FP thing, and I all these monad transformers and I don't know, monoids, these things. So I just wanted to know what all these people were talking about, and if it's really true what they say. And so that's why I investigated and tried it.
yeah. You also tried some Scala, right? I mean, you did some Scala stuff, probably more recently than Haskell, or maybe the other way around.
Well, I professionally I only worked like 5 months in Haskell, and that's already 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I haven't been doing a lot of. Sorry, did I say Haskell?
Scala.
Yeah, Scala. I meant Scala.
Sorry. Yeah.
I haven't been doing much Scala. Actually, I tried Scala before I got into that job, just to be a little bit prepared. And actually, I was doing what is it called? The Advent of Code in 2000. I think it was 2015. It was the first year maybe of Advent of Code. So for those who don't know what Advent of Code is, it's during the period of Advent. That's like from December 1 to December 25th. Every day on a website there is a new coding challenge, and you can solve it in any language that you like. And what the website gives you is the input, and your program has to transform this input into an output, and you fill in the output on the website, and the website tells you if you have the right answer or not. So the language doesn't really matter. You can even do it in Excel or whatever you want.
Or on a paper.
Yeah, on a paper.
Yeah.
So I tried a few puzzles in Clojure, and there was one puzzle that involved, well, you couldn't actually do it without using mutability. and a lot of arrays. So mutable arrays, or maybe just one giant array that you treat like a matrix. Because if you didn't do that, your program just wouldn't be fast enough. It would take years probably to to finish. And that's when I started to get into problems with Clojure. And I asked on Stack Overflow, why is this so slow? This takes like, well, I used mutable arrays, but it took like 10 seconds, where in Scala it only took 1 second. So I was actually doing the puzzles in Clojure and Scala just to learn new language. And well, it turned out you had to add a lot of type hints and use the right array functions, and eventually you could do it. But this kind of stuff actually is a lot easier in Scala, because the compiler knows where you can keep using primitives and you don't have boxing, things like that. But that's also the only time that Scala was easier than Clojure.
one puzzle in Advent of Code, yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't been doing a lot of Scala apart from that.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days? Because there are a lot of open source couple of things that we want to talk about. First of all, one of the things that you gave a talk at Dutch Clojure Day. So can you explain? Can you give something about that project and what the story behind it and context?
Yeah. So I gave a talk about Refind, is what I call it. And Refind is a library, and it also has a couple of interfaces in the form of a web application. There is also a command line interface, and there is also a JavaFX interface made by another person, Joe Mage, he's called. And this library, what it does, it can find functions in Clojure for you based on example input that you give it, and also based on predicates if you want. So you can say, for example, I have the input number 1 and the number 2, and I expect the output to be number 3. So it comes up with the plus function. But it can also do more advanced stuff like that. For example, you can also say, I have this set and I have another set, and I want the intersection of it. Or you can say, I want just the output to be a set. So you can say set question mark. And then it comes up with all the functions that accepts 2 sets and returns another set. And so that, that's Refind. So I talked about it at the Dutch Clojure Days. So I gave a lightning talk.
And if I remember correctly, or maybe I'm not sure, because it's been a pretty long day at Dutch Clojure Day for me. It is driven by specs, or what is the engine behind it?
That's true. So Refind is driven by specs. It can only find functions that have specs for the arguments and also for the return value, but that's not a hard requirement. But at least for the arguments. And the reason for that is a lot of functions in Clojure accept input, and they, for example, if you have the input number 1 and you also want the output the number 1, there are a lot of functions that Clojure you can use. For example, you can use the function conj or the function merge. But it's kind of weird to recommend the function merge for accepting a number, right? As the identity function for a number. So that is why I used specs for that. So I spec'd a lot of core functions, and that is inside a project called Speculative. And that project was started together with 2 others people. Mike Fikes, Ray, you might know him.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
Maybe.
And another guy called Eric Essam.
Slipset.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's him. And that's actually where those specs are coming from. So the idea from Refined actually came when I was listening to a podcast called The REPL. And Martin Klepsch from Clj Doc, he was discussing with
Daniel Compton.
Daniel,
like an idea for, well, maybe it would be cool if Clj Doc could support something with spec. Maybe it could display specs or maybe relate things to each other using specs, or I don't know. And there I thought, well, we have all these specs in speculative. Maybe I could also do something cool with this. And there they were also discussing Hugel, which is a project in Haskell, where you can say I have a type A and a type B, and I want all the functions that have type A to B. So you can do queries like that. But that doesn't work in Clojure because we don't have types. But we do have specs, so that is kind of where the idea was born. And after, usually I listen to podcasts in when I am in the gym. So so I heard this idea on the podcast in the gym, and I went to home, and this idea was already forming in my head. And I think 2 or 3 hours later, Refined, the library was born, the command line interface. And it only took like one day later. Also, an HTML version was born. So
nice.
Yeah, and it tells a lot about Clojure. I think how quickly you can turn these ideas into real projects.
Yeah. And what is the idea behind speculative? Because I know you've been writing a lot of specs, you and of course Mike and probably Eric as well.
Yeah.
So you're specing all the core functions and all whatnot, and so is there an proposal to push that into core, or
So
where do you want to take
how
it?
the project started? It also started on Twitter, where everything starts in my life, right?
While you were sleeping.
Right, while I was sleeping. So I think Mike Fikes, he tweeted the idea of, well, I really like some specs for the core functions, or at least I think these specs should exist somewhere, because I'm wondering if I could use the merge function for this or that. I don't know exactly what he tweeted, but
I think his point, if I'm not wrong, was that the problem is an implementation problem, because if you're in ClojureScript and you're looking at Clojure, the question is, what is the right behavior? If you're implementing the language, what should you actually, without actually stepping through all of the code in Clojure, can you get a little bit more information to say what the correct behavior should be with some given inputs? I think that was his idea. And that's the course of the intention of spec in some respects.
Yeah. And then Eric Essam, he also responded on that thread, and I responded on that thread. And first I've had a lot of reserved thoughts about this, because I already suspected that if you would write a lot of core functions and instrument them during development, or I don't know, during development, things would get a lot slower. And that was my initial thought. So I thought, well, I don't know if it's a good idea, but we might try it. And so Eric made a repo, and he committed the first specs. And I thought, well, let's just play the game and see what happens, right? And so I made some specs, and Mike made some specs, and eventually we added some tests. And then Mike Fikes has a project called CoalMine. And CoalMine is like a body of foreclosure solutions. Foreclosure is a website with closure puzzles, and people can commit their code there, and you can do golfing, and so a lot of solutions are already stored there. And then we had the idea to verify these specs using that code. So that project is called Coal Mine. It's basically a set of solutions for Clojure. And there we detected that some specs, either some specs were wrong or people were doing crazy stuff. Like,
Shocker.
so people were, yeah. So a lot of people were using merge to add a key, I think they were using merge as the conj function. So everyone thought, well, I want to add an element to this set, and they used merge for it. That basically, I think that works, but so we found a lot of issues like that. But we also found some examples from the wild. So for example, the merge, we added like a spec for merge that said, well, the inputs have to be maps, like Clojure maps. But then there was some code from a repo called Day of Datomic. And there they also used Java util hash maps. And well, we looked at the code and we thought, well, yeah, basically that works. And it's not surprising that it works, because merge basically treats the second and the next arguments as seekables of map entries.
Mm-hmm.
And a hash map is a seekable of a Java hash map is a seekable of map entries. So we changed the spec to that, and eventually Eric was not so active anymore, and he thought I should get the repo because I was committing very actively. I got the hang of it, and so I inherited the repo and added a lot of specs, and also tested a lot of specs and got feedback from a lot of users like, the spec is complaining about this, maybe it should be changed. And so the specs got refined over time. And but my first thought that maybe if you instrument all these specs, it will maybe have too much impact on performance. That thought was right, I think. It really is noticeable in production or in development. So that's one thing that I didn't like. And then I had the thought, well, if these specs are maybe not useful to instrument all the time, can we still use them for something? And that is where Refine was born, because Refine doesn't instrument the specs; it only searches the specs. So for example, if you have an input like number 1, so then it searches for all the functions where that accept an argument that have a predicate or a spec that matches this number 1. So merge automatically is eliminated because it doesn't accept numbers.
But Michael, Michiel, just before you go on to that, I mean, I don't think the notion of speccing all of the core functions, etc., should be abandoned, because I remember, Stuart Holloway said in the past that he might, in the future, there may be different builds of Clojure, ones which have instrumentation and ones which don't. For example, I mean, that's all speculation whether it actually comes off or not. But I think the notion of having a Clojure build with all the specs on there, that maybe you only turn on when you're doing testing or something. Maybe you can turn it off when you're in your IDE or you're, at the REPL or whatever. Or maybe you turn them on in that case. Again, if you have, I mean, the whole nice thing about specs to me is they're optional. So having a flag where you can just basically turn them on and turn them off as you need them, strike, this instrument, uninstrument thing, the new word, instrument.
Yeah.
That's it's like where you're sucking in rather than blowing out on a saxophone, I guess.
But shouldn't that be like instrument and outstrument? I mean, I don't like instrument. I mean, it should be like instrument and then outstrument. So that makes more sense.
Yeah, but it's too many letters.
What you're saying, Ray, is already possible with the specs that we have in speculative, so you can turn them off only or turn them on only in development, and that's totally possible. But things get a little bit slower, so you'll just have to accept that.
Sure.
And maybe if you're like making a CRUD app, it doesn't really matter. But if you're making like an very data intensive app with a lot of data going around, lots of I/O, hot loops, then it starts to become noticeable. But I think there is the right place for this.
Well, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be on or all off either, does it? You could. You can instrument specific functions, for example. It doesn't have to be like. That's a nice thing, isn't it? That's the nice thing about it's gradual. So you can choose to have like all the specs instrumented, or just some of them, or blah blah blah. You've got a lot of choices there.
That's true. That's true. And I think the functions that the first candidates that you should probably instrument in tests are the set specs, because the set functions accept like vectors and things like that. And if you do a set union on vectors, weird things come out. Probably things you didn't want. And the set specs really protect you from that kind of unexpected behavior. Also, when you if you do a union or intersection on two things, and one thing is a set, but the set is smaller, then, for example, the vector that you're unioning unioning, then the base collection will be the vector and not the set, and so all the elements will be conched onto the vector, and the result will be a vector and not a set. So that can be really surprising. So you will still have duplicate elements in there. And also strings. So strings are treated as a seekable of characters. So you can have surprising outputs with the set function. So I think it's really good to instrument those during, for example, unit testing.
But if I remember correctly, you were also using a lot of open source code to check if there is any anomalies. Because my not question, but something to discuss here is that if we are switching to a language like Haskell, all these things are completely non-problems, right? Because you have a type, so fuck it, it's impossible for you to use things like this. So
that's true.
What is your understanding, or sorry, not understanding? What is your feeling when you used this on a lot of open source projects? I mean, did you find anything? How prevalent is this misuse or of the code?
I actually have a list in speculative.
Okay.
Where I keep
naming and shaming.
Naming and shaming. Well, actually, it's more like look what speculative found. Let me check.
And now you release the enterprise edition for just €20 per month.
We actually find many things, but I wrote a spec for. Let me see. Yeah, there was something in Plank actually.
Oh man, you found a mic.
Yeah.
You shamed your mate.
Yeah. So there was. So in Plank there was the usage of FNIL, FNIL plus, I think, and so what FNIL? I think the expression was FNIL plus 0 or something, and what that does is so if it returns a function. And if you call that function with nil in the first argument, that will be treated as 0. But I think Mike called that function with more numbers. And so it was like you got something like plus 0, nil or something. And well, JavaScript is very accepting. So that still didn't really raise an error. But but it was not according to our spec, where the spec for plus said it only accepts numbers and not nil. So that is where we found one thing that wasn't really manifesting as an error, but it could be made more
safer.
Safer. So that was one example. Also we found I think we made a spec for merge, and I don't know what is the arity for merge actually. I have to look it up. But initially we spec'd it like it should at least have one argument, and maybe that's not. Well, that's actually not true. So the spec was not correct.
Yeah, because it will return a transducer or something.
But when we instrumented this, and then I tried to run some code from the Java project, then we actually found a call with merge with 0 arguments, which was correct. But this call was at the top level, so it wasn't doing anything. So we found a useless code with it.
That's good.
You
scoured the entire internet and found one line of useless code. So I think we count that as a success. I mean.
And also, actually, one more.
You never found our code.
I think there's a few more lines of useless code in other non-Clojure projects, but from a Clojure perspective, I think that's a win. Of all the Clojure code out in the world, I found one line that wasn't good. Well, I think that's going to be the headline of this story.
And actually, we also made a spec for merge with. And I think it only accepts map entries as it should be a seekable of map entries and not a seekable of vectors of 2 elements, because in Clojure that doesn't work. They should be map entries, but Clojure script actually used vectors of 2 elements in the beginning as map entries. So a lot of code relied on this, but this changed in a later version of Clojure script. And then I found one library, secretary, in Clojure script that is a routing library that was still using vectors with merge with. So we detected that early actually using the spec that we wrote. So that was nice. So we made a pull request to change it, and it was fixed.
But in general, I think it shows that the probably this is still a point of debate. I think, and in general, that shows that even though we didn't have specs, most of the code was written in a decent way, right? I mean, we didn't miss in Clojure at least the typing or spec information that much.
Well, you usually find out if your code is wrong just by using it, right? So I mean, if you have a library that it has existed for 5 years, it's very unlikely that you're still finding things that are wrong.
But this is the I think the kind of difference in thinking in when I'm writing Clojure code versus Scala or Haskell code, that there is no I'm going to fix it as I go. I'm going to build it up as I'm progressing. There is no mathematical rigor that I need before I'm going to run my program. So that is something.
And actually, I think that's true. And so that you find less errors at compile time. But it's a trade-off, because in Clojure I have the REPL and I can freely experiment. I have thought a lot about this. So for example, if I have a giant Haskell code base and I want to experiment like in one file, well, what would happen if I added just one field to this type and I want to experiment very locally? Then in Haskell I would have to change my entire code base before I can continue with my experiment, because the compiler complains. But in Clojure, I can just make this local change or add a key and everything will still work. And I can experiment locally and see if things will work out, and then convert the rest of the code also to that idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the trade-off is not that easy actually, as
Yeah.
some people.
Yeah, I mean, if
make
you
it
argue
seem.
on the other side, in Haskell, it will tell you where exactly you need to change the code. So there is
Yeah,
no,
that's true.
the mental gymnastic of, okay, this map is going from this to this to this, and then this key. So basically going through, a search and replace sort of way.
Yeah, I usually use ag for that.
Yeah, exactly. Or AG or whatever the
Yeah.
fancy thing, rip grep or whatnot.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
e- e-
about speculative, I want to say
yeah.
another thing, because we found maybe not so many problems in existing code, but we did find, while writing speculative, we found a lot of problems in the implementation of spec itself in ClojureScript. So I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, almost 20 issues that we fixed in ClojureScript
Nice.
while developing things, like something cannot be instrumented in the REPL in Node or something like that, right? Or maybe like a var_args function. If I make a spec for this and the function is var_args, I get a Stack Overflow error for some reason. And yeah. So
actually, the funny thing is that I think ClojureScript is in many ways more complicated to implement than Clojure, because actually Clojure is implemented on top of one virtual machine, on top of one kind of set of understood constraints, where ClojureScript is, well, you've got Node, you've got the browser, and all the browsers have different JavaScript engines. So you've got JavaScript Core, you've got V8, you've got Chakra. So it's kind of, and there's no spec, by the way. Well, there's a kind of spec, but not for kind of languages like compile2 languages, I mean, basically they use the Clojure compiler to do that. That's their spec, isn't it? But that itself is a moving target as well,
That's true.
So
yeah, we actually found some inconsistencies between Clojure and ClojureScript using those specs. So that's another reason why those specs can be useful. So we write one spec for both Clojure and ClojureScript, and then we find examples in ClojureScript that do not conform to this spec, and that sometimes that boils down to an implementation difference in ClojureScript.
It should be interesting to see, and I know that he's working on it, but when David comes out with the CLR version of spec, to see if they can run the specs on the CLR as well.
Yeah.
And then I think you were just talking about Condo or something. I mean, I'm not into the latest vernacular, whatever Condo is. I have
Come
no
on,
clue.
I can see that from the back of your room,
No, I have no fucking
Not
clue
like
what that
mine.
is. So,
Yeah.
obviously.
So
what is CLJ Condo and what is Condo?
Okay. So what is CLJ Condo? CLJ Condo is a linter for Clojure.
Yeah, but don't talk about that yet. Talk about Marie first, because she's more interesting.
Okay, let's
is
talk
Marie?
about Marie. Okay,
Yeah.
You want to know who Marie Kondo is? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
I think many people actually don't know who Marie Kondo
Do
is.
you have Netflix?
Thank God.
Maybe.
No, I don't.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
Yeah.
He's got a bookshop,
on
though.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on Netflix there is a program of a Japanese lady who helps people clean their houses and declutter their mess, actually. And she has a method called KonMarie, and this method is basically decide if a thing sparks joy in your life or that it's only like weighing you down, or it's just mess that you never got around to clean up.
Okay.
And she has like an order of categories that you have to go through. Like first start with your, I think,
The clothing, I think.
clothing.
Your partner, and I'd be out of my home already.
Yeah, so we start with your clothing, and then start with I don't know. I think I
Stuff,
never
yeah.
got past that stage. But there are also books. The books came first, and everyone was
okay.
talking about this. It was like becoming like a fashion or hip thing in all the
Okay.
bookshops, or about self-improvement department. They were all Kondo books, and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Really, those
And,
bookshops should have been pretty empty by that stage. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the time they reach books level,
Yes.
Yeah.
If they've actually
So-
read Marie Kondo, it's like, get rid of all this Shakespeare shit, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Finnegan's Wake,
Or-
get
or-
rid of it.
Or Finnegan's Wick, whatever the fuck that is, like.
Let's go. But Jack and Jill, let's keep it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It brings joy.
That
It
sparks
brings
joy.
Yeah.
Sparks joy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically who Marie Kondo is. So
Okay. So that's the reference that I missed. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not really keeping up with all the fancy shit that is happening around me. Obviously.
That's okay. It's just a name. So as long as you can remember the name, it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
And-
so let's talk about CLJ Kondo. Before CLJ Kondo, Emacs or some other shit. Well, I know the answer, but
Emacs and some other shit.
Ha!
what is some other shit?
Well, I have to
Visual
admit,
Studio
I
Code.
use Emacs for most of my things, but for usually when I have to edit like a markdown file and I want a nice preview, then I usually use something like VS Code or Atom, because it's nice. I think that it just works nicer that way. So
Yeah.
But that's basically the only time I go outside of Emacs.
But there is a live server thing on Emacs that you can actually render the HTML file while you're typing your file.
Yeah.
So that's super cool, actually. Anyway,
Yeah,
of course,
but,
you know.
but I do use Emacs, but I still feel like a noob in Emacs. But
Everybody is, except for probably Richard Stallman and maybe,
yeah,
I think David
have
Miller's
been
not a
using it.
noob. Yeah.
No.
I think I got only into Emacs because of Clojure, because in 2010 there weren't a lot of options for other editors, so I was using this slime Clojure thing to get my class path set up, and I know it was very difficult back then, and I was still on Windows then, so it was even more difficult. But that's how I got into Emacs, and I never really became like a professional Emacs tweaker.
So
I
is that
just
something?
use,
Is that something you do with your bottom? Is it?
Yeah, I guess. And I'm still using
Emacs
Emacs.
is weird to me. You know,
Yeah. I
going
know.
on stage and being an Emacs tweaker.
Yeah, I know. And I'm still using Emacs. I think it's called Prelude. So the thing by
from Bojidar.
by Bojidar,
Yeah.
because I'm using Cider, and I was guessing like if I'm using his stuff, at least that's compatible with Cider, so stuff doesn't break every time I upgrade Cider. But unfortunately, that's not true. So
Why doesn't he call it glass? You know, then you can have like cider in a glass. You know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know anything about Emacs, so.
But
And he's the
I'm
expert
still
on naming, so.
I'm a happy Prelude user, so yeah.
Okay. So now back to Kondo, back to regular programming.
Okay. Yeah.
So CLJ Kondo.
So yeah, the story behind CLJ Kondo. I'm actually I have been using a linter enclosure in that gives editor feedback in my Emacs for a while, and that is Joker. And Joker is a static code analyzer. At least I think that's how it works. And it's pretty useful. So it gives like arity errors, and it can show like this var that you're using. I don't know where it came from. Maybe you're missing an import or something. Or if you write down a hash map and you don't have an even number of values, like keys and values, then it complains. So it gives you a lot of useful feedback even before you evaluate your code into the REPL. and I like that very much. I have been using it for 3 years, and yeah, I think it's super cool. Everyone should give it a try. There's also integration for other editors, so it's not Emacs specific. And you can also use it in CI if you want. I'm not doing that, but I'm doing it for the editor integration. And but there were some things in Joker that I think it should be possible, but it wasn't in Joker. And I looked into maybe contributing to Joker, but it's written in Go.
Go, yeah.
And yeah, I'm not really proficient in Go, so it was in the back of my mind for a while, and and there is another story behind CLJ Condo. Because I wrote a blog post, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago about debugging technique that I call inline def. And some people, it's kind of, some people don't like it, but so what you can do, for example, if you have a function that is, let's take like, for example, you have a web server, and this web server calls a handler, like a ring handler, and this ring handler calls another function in your code base, and that calls another function. And when you do a request, sometimes you get an exception, but you want to see exactly the input that this function got. So you want to capture this input somewhere, right? Because you want to have the entire request and all the information that it has gathered along the way. So what you can do is you can define an atom and then put the stuff into an atom, but you can also just make like a temporary var where you store this request. So then you can say in your function as the first line, well, def r and then the request. So you're basically creating a var to inspect the information later. So I call that technique inline def, and I think it's only for debugging, so it's only temporary, and you should remove that code when you're done debugging, because you're not supposed to define new vars inside a function, right? It's bad style, so you shouldn't be doing that. But as long as your colleagues don't see it, I guess it's fine. But I thought, well, I accidentally committed sometimes my inline defs, and I was a little bit embarrassed. So I thought it would maybe nice to have a linter that detects these inline defs. But how can I do this? It shouldn't be too difficult, because Clojure code is just data. There we have the cliche, and well, it shouldn't be too difficult. So let's try. I think I tried Tools Analyzer, and that worked. But then I tried to make it fast, because Joker is very fast. It's native code, so if you start it, it's only a few milliseconds, right? And so I wanted to also have that experience, and then in my REPL or in my editor. And then I tried to compile this code that I made with Tools Analyzer using GraalVM, and that didn't turn out to work very well, because Tools Analyzer uses evaluation, and it does macro expansion while it analyzes the code, and that stuff isn't possible in GraalVM. So then I decided to look further, and then I found a library called Rewrite CLJ. And what that does, it's based on tools.reader, and it emits like kind of like things that also Tools Analyzer also does, but it doesn't do any evaluation. So it's more like it's only static data that you're getting, and not any meaning attached to it. So it doesn't do any macro expansion or something. So using that, I was able to get my first feature, the inline def linter, and I think I did two others. Like this idea was it was only a couple of hours that the first version of Sail Condo was born. So I did inline dev, and then I had an idea like, well, you can have a let expression, and if you have a let expression immediately in the body of that let expression, that's often not necessary because you can move the bindings in the same let, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need two nested let expressions. So I thought, well, that's kind of like an redundant. So that is actually where the name Sail Condo came from. Like this is a redundant stuff. Let's get rid of it. So I made the redundant let linter and also the redundant do linter, because you can also have a do expression with only one thing in it, and that's also redundant, right?
Yeah.
And also you can have try catch, and with also a do in it. That's what you see often, but that's not needed because try already has an implicit do. So that's all stuff you get. It doesn't spark joy. You can't get rid of it. And those three things were the initial things, and it was only a couple of hours with rewrite SailJ and then GraalVM to make a binary for Mac OS and Linux. So then I thought, well, this is cool, right? I can make things that Joker, in the style of Joker, because I was really a fan of Joker, and I'm still am a fan of Joker, using Clojure itself, so not written in Go, and then make it just as fast and get the feedback in my editor just as fast. So that I found really cool, and then I just started from there actually, and I started adding things. So one thing I missed from Joker was Joker can lint incorrect arities of your own functions. So you define a function foo that takes one argument, and later in the file you call it with two arguments, and then you get a message about it, right? But what Joker cannot do is when foo lives in another file and you refer to that namespace and then call foo, you don't get an error because Joker is only aware of one file at a time.
That is a joke.
So it's basically not a full compiler. It's basically just a per file linter.
Yeah.
So it's not. It's a file namespace analyzer, not a whole program analyzer.
Yeah, right. And that's where I got the idea. Like we can improve on this. So I'm doing the same arity linting as Joker, but it can also remember things that it found in other files and then say, well, this foo you're calling from there, it's wrong over here. So it's two arguments instead of one.
So you're also, is it also possible to do something like unused vars or unused functions or whatnot?
Yeah, so in the last version, or in the version that I released a week ago, a new linter was introduced called required but unused. So you're requiring a namespace, but you're not actually using it anywhere in this file. So you can remove the require, and that's because actually
because I used something called line Yagni, like you ain't gonna need it, sort of a plugin for identifying things, and actually. It hasn't been working as I expected, but at least it gives some sort of hints because it can also do like a parent and child thing. So child function is being called and used in parent, but the parent is not used anywhere. So that kind of hierarchy, but it always ended up giving some sort of an error or something. These are the things that I miss when I'm working on a bit of a larger code base, and then if I'm taking over from somebody else, and there are lots of functions I know they're unused, and then I have to do like search and replace or that kind of shit to see is this used anywhere. And also the other part is if it is written as a quote unquote library, because every var is public because it hasn't been written in such a way that this is def and minus or something. It's very difficult to see where exactly this function is being used because I want to reduce the API surface area.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be really cool to have that kind of functionality. I'm not sure if IntelliJ has or Cursive has that.
Yeah,
kind of
well, I think
functionality
the thing about IntelliJ is or Cursive is that it's built on top of this kind of analysis that
MPS or
that
something.
MPS offers. Yeah, so you have all these kind of like. You can do find usages, for example. So you can say, okay, find usage of this function across the entire project or across, the various scoping that they have. And they have all the kind of unused imports and stuff like that. But I think, to be honest, I think IntelliJ's like support for this kind of stuff is really good on Clojure, and Cursive's support for this is awesome on Clojure. I mean, it really is outstanding. But the Clojure script side is a bit more rough, I think, So I think any kind of linters that are cross-platform or that give Clojure script more of a leg up will be really helpful,
What is different about Clojure script that Cursive finds difficult? I mean, it's just the same namespace form, right?
Yeah, probably.
But I think it's just because it's mixing with JavaScript, and JavaScript is is itself an untyped language. So the underlying kind of analysis that the MPS offers is weaker than the kind of analysis that can be offered in a type system like Java. That's my guess, anyway. I mean, obviously, we one of these days we'll finally get Colin on here to explain himself, But that's my guess.
But Michiel, the CLJ Condo thing that you're building, so it does both Clojure and Clojure script, or only Clojure for now?
No, it does. It doesn't matter as long as it's normal Clojure. So so it doesn't care if it's Clojure or Clojure script. And it also supports CLJC. So if you have if you define like a function with conditional expressions, and say in the conditional expression for Clojure it has only one argument, and in the conditional expression for Clojure script it has two arguments, then it will still work.
Nice.
So it will still link that correctly. So
I'll give it a try, because I think most of the time I'm writing CLJC these days. So that could be super fun to try.
Yeah.
All right. So any other things that you want to talk about, your open source work, before we talk about your commercial work?
I think we...
One thing I would like to say, actually, Michiel, is that I think, although you might not count this as open source work, I think the fact that you are so active on Stack Overflow is quite impressive for the community, I mean, you really do answer a shitload of questions on Stack Overflow and are very helpful out there. So, I think round of applause, everybody, for this guy. He's really helpful.
Yes. That's true. Yeah.
It's also a lot of fun doing this. So if it wouldn't be a lot of fun, I probably would be doing this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's it's good for you and it's good for everyone else. So I think for us it's thank you. I often think, well, how do I do this? Then it's it's always funny nowadays. It's like a toss up between you and Michiel Marcic, who the answer is from.
Marcic.
Yeah. His answers are a lot better. So if you have to choose, he's amazing.
Yeah.
Totally amazing.
So we'll get him one day as well. I mean, we're slowly getting there to get everybody onto our podcast.
Yeah.
So what are you working on these days? I mean, commercially, if you can talk a little bit about your the stuff that you're getting paid for.
Yeah. The last few years, I've been contracting with a company called Dr. Evidence. And we are working on a project called Doc Search, and this project is basically a search engine for medical literature, powered by natural language processing and artificial intelligence buzzwords. And it also offers a lot of analytics on your search results. So if you have a query about some kind of disease or medical topic, then you get a lot of results, and then you can filter down in those results. and see what kind of search terms correlate with the results, and see where this topic is mentioned around the world, like distribution in time of the articles that we found.
What's the
things like
audience,
that.
Michiel? Is it a medical audience or is it a general public?
The audience is varied. So a big part of the audience is pharmaceutical companies that would like to track information about their topics of interest that they are making medicines for. What they could also do is like track like publications about their own medicines and see how effective they are, or what side effects they might cause in patients. Or and if they are very effective, they can also use that for marketing, of course. But also another part of our audience is like researchers.
Right.
So researchers that would like to track topics in their area of research, and like hospitals, things like that. At least that's what I think are the user base, because I haven't been really talking to the end users. So I'm working in a team of programmers, and we have one guy, the manager Joel, and he does most of the communication with the others in the company, and also clients. So usually there's a layer in between, but this is what I think are the users.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
You probably find that it's some evil scientist somewhere, but they're just keeping you in the dark about it. Yes, tell them to do more awesome stuff while we take over the world.
Right. Yeah.
I think the super anticlimactic would be that this project is entirely funded by North Korea. That'll be anticlimactic. This is how North Korean, pharmaceutical companies run. I'm like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably will be Cuba that will be funding it, because I think they're the only ones with like good health research.
Yeah.
A communist country, anyway.
Yeah. So this product is built entirely in, or mostly actually in Clojure. So the back end of our application is in Clojure. The front end is in Clojure script, usually using your reframe and things like reagent, things like that. So the usual stuff, right?
Yeah.
And we also have another component that annotates the text with certain tags that we recognize as certain topics. So the natural language processing, basically, that's also built in Clojure.
Oh, okay.
And we have another component actually that's built in Python, because of that's very machine learning heavy, and it was easier to do that in Python. So
Nice. Okay. So any other topics that we want to touch upon? I think we're almost 1 hour. Pretty good time, I think. A lot of different topics. So maybe because you've been in Clojure since 2010.
Yeah.
And of course, you've been participating a lot. As Ray said, you're contributing a lot to the community, and now even you're building the tools that can be used by everybody. And I know you've been doing a lot, especially, I think last Advent of Code, you set up like a test stuff for that as well.
Yeah.
Like being active in the community and then encouraging everybody to or giving answers when people need them. So that's a really nice thing, because that's how we support each other, right? That's the whole idea of being in a community. So what do you think about the community these days? Like how, because of the conferences that you're attending and all that stuff?
Yeah. I think it's growing, actually. That's my impression. So every time I go to a conference, I'm amazed that I do not only see the familiar faces, but also a lot of new users. But I can't really compare this to other communities, because I haven't been like an active member of I don't know, the Java community or the Haskell community. So I can't give a fair comparison, but that's my impression right now, that the community is growing, and especially the European conference community is really doing a good job in the last few years, I think. And yeah, I actually have trouble keeping up with all the new stuff that keeps coming out. So yeah. I also listened to was it the last show with I don't know, the REPL or Devon, but it was with Saak Telman, and
REPL probably.
That ended a little bit. Oh, I had a little bit pessimistic feeling how he described it. So like, well, it's been nice, but the community is not seen as like it's seen as how did he describe it? As a like more like a cost than a value by Cognitect, but I don't see it that way. I don't know. I don't share that negative emotion, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, there is a lot of obviously, if you measuring, Clojure or any language, it's a very difficult task. I mean, I think we crossed some critical mass already a long time ago, because I've been, at least in the Netherlands, I've been using Clojure since 2009-ish. I think that's the first time when I wrote my first Clojure thing. Pretty horrible, Clojure and Wicket interop, a long time ago on Java and all that shit. But since then, I think we're slowly growing, as you pointed out, the multiple meetups and then multiple conferences. That's one measure of how many people are coming. But one thing what I realized is that maybe this is just my rough estimation. Like for every one person who comes to the conference, there are at least like 20 people who don't show up at the conference.
Minimum. Yeah.
Because I constantly get surprised every time I talk to somebody. They're like, "Oh, we're doing Clojure." Like, what the fuck? I didn't even know that your company existed. This is like a million times that I keep hearing. And
I had the weirdest thing like a couple of weeks ago. We have a Clojure meetup in the Netherlands, and it started as the Amsterdam Clojure meetup. But now it's called the Dutch Clojure Meetup, and there we are also visiting other cities like in Utrecht. So one evening there was a Clojure Meetup organized in Utrecht at a company called MediQuest, and it was about Clojure CLR. So I thought, well, let's go there. CLR, I don't know. Let's just see, right? And it turned out that they were actively using and developing libraries for Clojure CLR in the last 4 years. And I've never ever heard of this before. So I think that confirms what you're saying. Like for every person that's shouting on Twitter about every little Clojure thing like me, there's probably 20 others that never say anything.
Yeah. Because this has become a even bigger thing in the recent I wouldn't say recent years, but probably maybe 1 or 2 years, because since I was doing this podcast and then also doing a bit of consulting, then people send me an email saying, "Hey, do you want to take a look at our code base?" So like, what the fuck? I mean, who are you? I mean, you've been using Clojure. I've never known. Okay, are you going to sponsor our conference? That's my first question. But it is crazy. I think there is 1 to 20 relationship. At least that's my rough estimate. People don't show up on Slack, or they're being productive, I guess. They don't need to talk about shit like me and Radar.
But I think the other thing as well is that I think there's a distinction between like most Clojure users that basically are just using the language quite happily and keep on getting like drops from Rich like spec or various things that just keep on getting better and better and better in the language. And they're just like, wow, this is just so awesome. Keep on being happy, And then there are people who want to write libraries in it, like Michiel, who are super happy that it's so flexible and usable. And you can there's definitely still plenty of space for innovation in the community environment. Like I'm writing a REPL and a multi-user REPL and stuff like this, and I'll probably use some of your stuff in the end. There's plenty of nice space around in the community. You see lots and lots of little projects popping up that are adding value, that are very useful. But there are certain people that want to, be right in the heart of it, and I think that's where the let's say the negativity or where it's where let's say Rich is a bit more controlling, that people get a bit pissed off, But for 99% of the population who are Clojure users, it doesn't matter, The programming language is awesome.
That's true.
There's plenty of. I mean, it's a Lisp, so there's plenty of space for innovation outside of the core team. So, and I think that's what most people are doing actually.
Yeah. I think another data point is that, otherwise our crap for whatever Ray and I are doing for 50 episodes and then fucking 3 years, this won't run for 3 years, and then now suddenly we have so many nicer, hopefully better podcasts than our crap that we put out. Like REPL from Daniel and Jacek.
Yeah, Jacek Shea. It's just started, isn't it? This Clojure script.
Jacek.
Yeah, Jacek Shea or something, Clojure Script podcast, and there is also another one like the Clojure.
There's a design podcast. Those guys.
The functional programming.
And functional
exactly.
Design,
I think they call it functional design in Clojure, but that's a funny one because they like talk code through their entire podcast, and it's nice. I listen to it and I get a lot out of it actually. I think the guys are doing a great job there.
I don't even listen to our own crap. So I'm ashamed if I listen to other podcasts. I'll feel even bad. Holy fuck, we're pretty crappy.
Well, I don't think so because I've always enjoyed the show, and it keeps me my workout session less boring. So
but what you're trying to say is it keeps your heart rate high, right?
It keeps my like controversial opinions, and that keeps my heart rate up as well. And
so, are you saying that deafening is good for your health?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Uncontroversial.
That's not controversial. But I think there's room for more podcasts because sometimes I'm on the treadmill and I'm running out of Clojure podcasts. So that's cool. And I'm actually filling it up with more general podcasts. Like I think I found Coder Radio lately. That's a nice podcast, but it's more like general. But if there's more Clojure podcasts, I would be happy to queue them up first, right?
Yeah.
Before I run out. So there's still room.
Yeah.
Well, there's plenty to talk about.
But that's also another data point, right? That's true. Yeah. So that's another data point that this is a growing community, and we have plenty of ideas that needs to be put out in the. What is put out? No, put out is probably to extinguish.
You can put things out to pasture. No, hang on. Put things out.
Is it okay? Okay, I don't know.
To expose
English.
Share.
Yeah, to expose in the public. Yeah, in the share in the public. Yes, of course. Thank you. I think it's overall it's a fantastic community, and from the conferences wise, as you said, Michiel, we have like 4 conferences now in Europe already. So I'm looking forward to going to Heart of Clojure and probably to Clojure Tray as well. This is going to be fun, I think. So, any other closing thoughts before we close our episode?
Keep doing the great work on the podcast, I would say. Another 50 episodes at least.
Thank you. We'll try. We
need to retire at some point,
Yes. I think, let's see. Because I think that the momentum is there, and then there is a lot of interesting people to talk to and a lot of interesting ideas that we can learn from people. That's another secret goal of mine.
Yeah.
Using this.
That's right.
So that's been going pretty well. So that is the end of our 50th episode, which is amazing. I think 3 years ago when we started this, we never expected it'll be, reaching episode number 2.
Certainly not number 10, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, double digit was crazy for us. Now we are really we're halfway through the triple digits. So, let's see how far we get.
Well, you can always invite the same 50 guests again.
We keep on saying that, by the way.
We
keep on saying, oh, yeah, we'll invite you back in a year or two's time. It's this usual bullshit. But actually, this time, you're right. We should just do it,
Yeah.
So the first episode was called Hello World, and the second was called The Reader. And then suddenly you ran out of ideas and then invited other people, right?
No. By the second episode, look, it was two people, right? So we ran out of our brains, we are like basically two idiots talking some shit. And then we realized, I think 2 episodes is enough.
I think, see, the thing is, everything is, Mike Fikes is to blame for everything in the end. Like, he's to blame for all the things that you did, and he's to blame for all the things that we did. Because I spoke to him on the reader. I can come and join you and tell you a few things about that. So he did, and then we had the idea. Maybe we should have some guests on. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the third one was with Mike Fikes, and then Persistent Collections. That was without a guest.
Yeah, that was again our
and then you had Hoplon with Mika Nishkin.
Yes. Yeah. Hoplon.
So you all kind of alternated between topics and guests, and then it became guests.
I think we had a Village Idiots episode. Yeah. That was really awesome. I think everyone should go back and listen to
that. Which one was that?
Oh yeah, there's one of those things. Probably it's not good to dig through the history. There are more skeletons in Deaf and Closet now.
No, but you talk about like the history of this. I mean, it actually just feels like we're just starting in some ways on this podcast, even though it's like 3 years and 50 in. And so, for me, totally. I think we've been incredibly lucky. Maybe as we started the podcast relatively early in the Clojure podcast world. So we've been lucky to have, an amazing array of guests. Topped tonight by the unbelievable Bork dude. But, so we've reached an apex this evening. But, you're in good customer.
One of the highlights of...
You're in good company with Alex Miller.
One of the highlights of my career, I think.
That's true. This is one of the Hall of Fame episodes.
Yeah. So this is...
Maybe if
this is the peak of my career. It can only go downhill.
This is peak of our podcasting.
Remember, you're going to get invited back in 2 years' time, so
Okay, yeah.
But I think obviously, this is still an amazing thing that every Sunday. I think one of the things that I was talking to at Dutch Clojure Day is that like we do this on Sunday, which is like the worst possible time for me because I go through this stuff and then you have this kind of a podcast high. I talk to all the people and amazing people like you, Michiel, and other people. Now I can't sleep because tomorrow morning I need to get back to work, and then I feel like, oh fuck, I need to try this thing now because I just spoke to this person. So it's like a worst possible time for me, actually, in a nicest possible way, obviously. But and this is all because thanks to Ray, obviously. He started the discussion, and then at DCD 2016, I think. And then somehow he made me buy a microphone and then talk bullshit into it. And then Wouter joined, and then suddenly we started sounding professional, although the content that we are making was not up to the sound level quality.
Well, I figure if 1/3 of the content at least is decent, then we're okay.
Yes.
And since we have a guest, then we've definitely got that 1/3 is okay.
We're crossing that particular, like the baseline. So even though 2/3 of it is me and Ray, and the rest 1/3 is worth listening to.
Yeah, and usually we try and let the guest speak as much as possible. So to increase the proportion.
Yeah. But hey, so a big shout out to Wouter, who has been helping us a lot. At least in the last 2.5 years, almost, doing amazing job. Yeah. He's been spending a lot of hours making the audio sound pretty good, and obviously he's also a Clojure programmer, so he knows what what the crap that we are talking about. So he's the first person who gives us feedback on the episode, which is pretty nice.
The other thing I'd like to, we're probably going to go on a rounds, but I think shouting out to the Patreon people as well, because we kind of like obviously we do this in our own time, and it's we don't we don't need to be paid for it, but we've got some costs,
Yeah.
and it's nice that people are chipping in, a few euros or a few dollars. And so essentially we don't have any costs anymore, which is really good, and we can afford to like send WoW to Dutch Clojure Days and put him up in a hotel. And so it's really good. We've got, it means that we can, afford a few of these things, and it makes, our life as like Clojure people. It's also a weird thing. I think people give you money is a really weird thing. I mean, we kind of do it for a living with Clojure, but I think people contribute to your kind of side grift is nice as well, That sounds wrong somehow. Maybe you can say it better, VJ. Okay. I mean, we're really happy with these guys, basically, and girls,
What Ray is trying to explain in 18th century English literature is that, we are very thankful that you're, giving us... showing your support with your tweets, with your ideas for episodes, and also with the Patreon support. That's really helpful in terms of maintaining the costs, as well as every now and then we try to use that money for good causes.
Yes.
So that's the thing. So thanks a lot for listening, and again, big milestone, 50th episode. We do have a couple of other things in pipeline. And meanwhile, if you are running out of episodes, then go and listen to other podcasts like REPL or ClojureScript podcast and other stuff that Michiel pointed out. That's it from us. And have a nice evening, morning, or whenever you're listening to this stuff. And we'll see you in episode number 51.
All right.
And thank you, Michiel.
My pleasure.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. So yeah, I pressed the red button and it's now recording. So I'll post a screenshot to confirm this. So like we're really professionals, right?